What does it take to be a good leader? Well, there's certainly a lot of research and some pseudoscience out there, but there seems to be one thing for sure, and it just so happens to be a recurring theme on this show recently. It's authenticity. It's being yourself and learning to lean in and trust your intuition. And sometimes that even requires taking a leap of faith and knowing that imposter syndrome isn't real and you are exactly where you belong. I had an awesome time speaking with my guest today, Sarah Johnson, who is a former English teacher and school principal turned author, speaker, leadership coach, and podcaster. She's passionate about assisting others in seeking greater satisfaction in all areas of their full lives by helping them go beyond the work-life balance as well as develop strong leadership foundations. Sarah has a Bachelor of Arts in Secondary Education, a Master of Science in Educational Administration, a Certificate for Women in Leadership from Cornell University, and she is currently working on her PhD in Global Leadership and Change. This conversation was really a lot of fun, and I hope you have just as much fun listening in. And Empowered Educator workshops are filling up for this January, so you're going to want to grab your seat at empowereducator.com/workshops and discover how your impact changes when you focus on your own social and emotional well-being. Because the well-being of a school is dependent on the well-being of its educators, and it's time to shift the attention to you. Empowered Educator is changing the landscape of professional development, and its impact is making generational change. The Empowered Educator Winter Series starts on January 17th, and registration is now open. So claim your spot at empowereducator.com/workshops. You are a gift to this world, so act accordingly. Are you caught in the whirlwind of overwhelming responsibilities? And does the very thought of Monday morning send chills down your spine? Well, it's time to toss those feelings out the window. Welcome to Season 3 of the Take Notes podcast, where you get to make yourself the priority in order to show up as your best self. I'm your host, Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, emotional intelligence practitioner, mom of two, and founder of Empowered Educator, and I've been where you are. In this season, we're not just talking about surviving, we are diving deep into thriving. Are you ready to take the lead in your life? Well, let's do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Take Notes podcast. I am so glad you're here, and I am so excited to introduce our next guest. Today, I am talking with Sarah Johnson. And Sarah, I am so glad that we get to continue our conversations together. Thank you so much for being here.
Jen, it is absolutely my pleasure. I would talk to you every day if I could.
Yes, I know. We're new best friends.
Absolutely.
I love it. So let's just get right into it because we have such a short amount of time here and I really want to get all of the juiciness we possibly can out of today. So your focus recently has been on leadership. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the foundational practices of what makes a good leader? What have you found in your work, in your observations, and in your research?
So first of all, the funny part about this is it's like in an existential crisis in the last month as I take, like my 50th formal class on leadership, I swear. And I came across a text that I hadn't read that really just blew my mind open and helped me understand why, when I come across different people in my life that are leaders, why they're so vastly different and how the world tends to value styles of leadership, but they don't really spend time kind of peeling apart what leadership even means. And it sounds so silly, but I have spent time now in the last 6 weeks or so reading about leadership from the lens of behavior, from the lens of skills, from the lens of traits, situational leadership, and how all of these, there's 15 different ways of looking at leadership, how they all have a conceptual framework and literature and research behind them that has just made me suddenly come to another point of clarity after all of that. I think you know what that's like, studying, where you get down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh my gosh, turns out I don't know anything. And then it turns out that you're like, okay, actually, no, step back. I know plenty. And I guess I wanted to say that because I have spent a life in leadership ever since teenage years or younger, probably, when you can come up with those examples. And I've often thought, how in the world, as the youngest of 7, did I end up as a leader? Because as the youngest in birth order, that research will tell you that I'm supposed to be in prison and my siblings are supposed to be bailing me out.
We're glad that was not the case for you.
No. But anyway, I've circled around just to say that for me, what I've learned, and I still go back to this as a centering space for me, that there are foundations of leadership. And my philosophy is still anchored pretty heavy in a framework that I created in 2019. Would you be willing to let me talk it through a second?
Oh, I would love it if you did that. Yes.
All right. So most of us that listen to this podcast are educators and we love our acronyms. And for me, I was given this beautiful direction to write on the framework that has the FAITH acronym. So I just want to share that with your listeners really quickly, because this really truly is an acronym that helps kind of anchor us in our leadership foundations. So the F is free to be you. It's really about understanding yourself, your traits, the characteristics that make you unique as a leader. And it could be that you are an introverted leader, an extroverted leader. The world values one or the other, but we know that both of them can do a fantastic job leading. It's about your personality traits, the anchor of who you are. Are you a person who is very detail oriented, or are you a visionary? All of these things that make you uniquely you, that also then allows you to understand other people and to be able to be firm in that F of who you are without needing other people to tell you who that is, right?
Yeah.
A is affirmed in purpose. It's about being very anchored in a mission and a vision that is informed by a very clear set of core values. It allows you to not only repurpose yourself every day through chaos, but also helps you to put a filter through your decision making and be clear about what you're about, no matter what organization or context you're leading. And that's the A in faith. The I is intentionality. This goes back to some of my message with the balanced framework of living a whole full life, that you're not just focused, like you're not just your role, right? But also that it is strategic, that you are learning how to prioritize. In our schools, we're always talking about and need to be focused on continuous improvement, but it's making sure that you know what you are about as well as what your organization is about, so that there's clarity around that and that you're not trying to chase every little new, brand new, shiny tool, that you can stay focused and intentional in your work and help people to realize their best work. The T, this one's exciting and fraught, is transformation. It's embracing transformation. It is allowing yourself as a leader to evolve, to grow, but then also stimulating that transformation in your organization. And that is about, oh my goodness, this applied strategic planning behind all of that, learning about adaptive change and helping people to come to that common goal that you all want in your organization. And then finally, H, I took some at liberty with this. It's really wholehearted living and leadership. So it's understanding you as a leader need to have a strong handle on your emotional intelligence. You need to be able to have self-awareness, practice self-regulation. You need to be able to read a room and practice relationship management. Also develop your empathy. And so this whole framework for me, it just encompasses all of that good stuff. And I think that it's going to be different for everybody. You're going to present differently as the free to be you. How you move wholeheartedly is going to be different, Jen, than how I do. But that framework, it doesn't have to be linear. It just, to me, that's the foundation of being able to lead yourself so that you can lead others.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that. And completely speaking my language with all of those definitions, explaining that acronym. It's a really holistic way of thinking about leadership, because it does encompass all of those things you had mentioned before regarding a leadership style, or what are the behaviors or the skills or the traits or what you're doing in situationally. This idea really encompasses all of them. And you need this fundamentally in order to direct some of your choices regarding your behaviors and how you want to communicate and what skills you want to pursue. So I really think this is wonderful. And I would love to talk for a second about that first one, the free to be you, because I really think that in my experience, my observation, and I'm wondering if this has been your observation, if you aren't free to be you, the other four things that you mentioned are going to be more difficult.
Well, yes. And I also want to put a caveat here too, that if you aren't free to be you, First of all, many of us don't actually have that privilege in the organization that we might be living in. And I spend a lot of time thinking about this and trying to figure out what the solution is, because not every organization wants you to be exactly who you are. And that could be people in the organization, it could be the mission of the organization. And so I just feel like for leaders, it's really critical to understand who you are so you can know if who that person is aligned with where you're leading, because context really matters and we don't have to suffer. I think so
Right.
many of us feel like we have to suffer and
Yeah.
that we diminish our capacity and our own self-efficacy because we're just leading in the wrong context. So I just wanted to mention that because, of course, there's so much nuance here with gender, with all sorts of intersectionality of who we are in addition to our personalities, right? But yeah,
Sure.
I think that it starts there. We have to understand what we're about, who we are, value our strength, and understand where we can complement our leadership with the people we surround ourselves with.
Yes. And I'm really glad you said that, because once people start to understand who they are, that's a lot of the work that I do with Empowered Educator. We start with, who are you as your fully expressed, most authentic self, because that's where we all shine, right? You start to realize there are some things that may not be aligned with who I am. And I've been pretzeling myself to fit into this mold of how people think I should be, which leads to a lot of things. But one of the things you mentioned was struggle, which we don't have to. But another thing is this idea of imposter syndrome and trying to fit into a box where it isn't necessarily aligned to who you are. And I'm sure you come across this a lot. How does imposter syndrome play a role in this idea of free to be you?
Everywhere. We talk about this imposter syndrome a lot with when we talk about gender studies, but the truth is, and we learn this, that everybody suffers from imposter syndrome at some point and on some level. But absolutely, I'm going to take it from the context of where I led most recently in an organization as a female secondary leader, being the only female. 25% in our country have high school principals. Same with the superintendents. So it is really hard sometimes to get past that imposter syndrome simply because you continuously question whether you belong at that table simply by your mere presence being not represented, right? And so a lot of times understanding who you are and what you're about can really be challenging because we don't spend the time. We spend the time too much trying to fit into the mold. Just taking it from the gender studies element, that secondary principal role is still very masculinized. It absolutely is. And stereotyped, right? Because we know that men certainly don't want to drag themselves through the mud working 24 hours a day either. They want to have full lives, but this role has not shifted much. And so we find ourselves really questioning, okay, if we are a wholehearted person who wants to have a full life and have all of the family elements while also being a passionate person who has their own interests, in addition to that role, we constantly are questioning ourselves. Should we really be doing this? Should we really be at home instead of at this athletic event? Or should you really be up there on stage laughing in front of students, right? Like all these certain things that speak to who I am personally as a leader. I was constantly, that imposter was like, oh, secondary principals don't act like that. Or, ooh, should you really be stating your opinion right now? And et cetera, right? So that imposter syndrome is real. I think, though, that the more you spend time empowering, as and your work is so important, empowering yourself to lead that way and to be authentic, you start to realize that you were there for a reason, you're meant there. And you just have to consistently affirm that for yourself and not look to the people outside of you to give you that affirmation.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Isn't that, I get goosebumps talking about that stuff, because once you let go of the need for external affirmation and validation of your worth, that's when this journey begins, because then you can move into walking in your purpose with that affirmation from you and your clarity of your intention, as you say, and moving through transformation with more ease, because you don't need somebody else to affirm that shift and that change as you're moving through the discomfort. And then that wholehearted living piece, that is your fullest expression of you. So that's huge. And I would love to know a little bit of how you work with educators and leaders to get there. What is your process?
First of all, and I know that you know this, it is a deep involved process when you're trying to help somebody stimulate their own healing and their own growth. And a huge part of that for me, so when I work with clients and when I've done my firm foundations coaching, we start first with the Enneagram. And a huge part of that is just helping people to start to understand their motivations, their core desires, pieces of their childhood that might have informed why they behave the way they do now. But now the other thing is, I'm not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist, but you end up helping people just dive in to who they are. And that takes time and it takes a lot of effort. And I know that you know this. We don't sit in that a lot. I think, especially as educators, we're in a servant profession. So we end up spending so much time serving others and stimulating their growth that many of us, I found, I don't know if you found this, stopped our own personal development journeys to start into roles, to get on that hamster wheel. And we think we know ourselves. And in reality, we simply don't. We come to this space in our lives where there is like a turning point, a pain point, we call it, where we're forced into that. So many of us just get into the numbing behaviors. And so anyway, it's just helping people to get to that space first. Start here first, start what motivates me? Who am I at the core? What's the best version of me that I want to realize? And then we go from there. Right.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many different places I can take this. But for now, I want to just comment on a couple of things you just said, because you're so right in all of this. We generally leapfrog over the needs of the adults in these spaces because of the idea that we're serving kids, but we are not doing anybody any favors if we are not consistently developing ourselves personally. And this idea of healing bumps up against our ego. I mean, that's part of the obstacle here, because sometimes when we say the word healing, immediately there can be these thoughts of there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine. If you are human, which I'm assuming we all are if you're listening to this podcast, we are walking trauma responses. That's just how it is. That is how we've developed. That's how we've adapted. That's how we've navigated through this world. And healing isn't necessarily uncovering parts of you that are broken, because the truth is you're not broken. Nobody's broken. You're totally whole and beautiful and fine just the way you are. You don't need any fixing. And because you've been on this human journey, there are things that have come up in your life that deserve to be looked at so you can continue to grow and expand and ultimately have impact, because that's really what we're doing here as educators, is we are having impact on our communities and the children we serve. And the capacity for that impact is limited by your ability to dive into your own personal growth. And that is really how I feel. So this work is incredibly important. And the work that you do in talking with people about this normalizes these conversations more and more, because that's the conversation that needs to continue. So we know now we can have a conversation about healing without everybody getting uncomfortable, because this is just what we do here.
I agree with you 100% on all of this. And it's really interesting because, for example, if I go to a large organization and I speak on the concept of going beyond, I share that framework about how to help you live a more full life as a professional. I personally watch the room and I'm always struck, and I've been doing this for 5 years now, Jen. And there's always a person sitting in the back with their arms just crossed, looking skeptical as heck. And at first I would be like, oh, I'd question myself, and that imposter syndrome would just plague me. I always said there's just gonna be one. There's just gonna be one that is gonna remind me of my purpose and keep me speaking vulnerably and saying these crazy things. And typically they're the one that comes up and says, I needed this today. And sometimes the frustrating part is I just get to be that stimulator, and I never get to see where their journey goes because we're not on a coaching journey. It's just I've dipped into them, I poured into them, I've given them whatever, the pill from the matrix, whatever that happens to be, where they're just kind of starting to realize it. At some point, we all need to get to that space to see it. And I so deeply appreciate what you said about impact. And I know you are a person who loves to study. And I think that we've had such a disservice when we don't have educators study and understand the impact of vicarious trauma and all of the things that are leading us to burnout, because we weren't taught that stuff. We're just like, oh, you're going to go in and you're going to have such an impact and your educator life is going to have a ripple effect forever. But what about the ripple back into our spirits when we are working to impact kids? Then you're right, are not broken. None of us are broken, but our trauma butts up against theirs and there's a trigger. And at some point, we learn that we have compassion fatigue because we just don't have the healthy coping skills to manage this stress that nobody ever warned us about. Like, it's not just about going in and teaching grammar and how to deconstruct sentences. It's getting to know these people, which is very purpose driven and spiritual. But we just weren't prepared for that.
We weren't prepared for that. And part of it is generational. The science, even just of neuroplasticity, is new. So our older generations didn't necessarily know that this was even possible, that this existed, that we can actively change our brains in a way where we can rewire the way that we respond to trauma, where we can recognize what our mind body is trying to do with something that's activating, with a situation that makes us feel a certain kind of way. We have this ability to look at this objectively, and the science just wasn't there until relatively recently. So the way that educators were taught reflected their generations. And now we're in this time where we know what we know, so we can do better. And the reason why I love working with educators, one of the many reasons why I love working with educators, is that I really believe that's the linchpin. Because when educators start understanding this and access the skills, which we learn, skills are learned, they're not inherent, you're not born with them, we have to learn them. When we start getting really good at this work, it shifts a paradigm and we expand what's possible for our students. And I get choked up just talking about this, Sarah. We are shifting the way our future generations are going to live because you show up differently. That's what we're doing here. That's the generational change that we're making. That, yes, it's about your healing and your beautiful personal growth journey. And it's about the legacy because of the path that you're leaving in your wake. And that's the stuff that gets me up every morning.
Oh my gosh, I just heard fireworks and joy and I hear the passion coming from you, and I'm with you. I'm so with you. And you've been able to witness that. You can see that where you have this impact. And I just wanted to share personally, I think it's so good to help listeners who might be in a moment where they're like, okay, but I don't feel it right now, Jen and Sarah. Like what you're saying right now, I'm disillusioned, I'm exhausted. You can become empowered to do this work again with verve and passion. And I also think too that I think about our students and they just deserve the best versions of us. So not to play on that for you, to play a guilt. I'm not doing that. It's their only year of third grade that they'll ever have. It's their only year as a junior. It might be your 16th or 17th or 25th in education. And that might be exhausting to you, but it is their only. And again, not that murder, but man, you're so purposed. You don't just go in to a factory and punch a timesheet and that work wasn't meant for you. It was the work to impact others. And you can do that when you are whole and healthy. And I love thinking about the work that you're doing for educators to help them feel that way. I have a question for you, Jen. Can I turn this back on you a little bit?
Please, yes.
You and I both serve individuals. And I'm curious about your perspective on the impact of the systems, because we work in a flawed industry that is beholden to politics and funding and all of the things. So where are we at with that?
Oh, I love this question. So I'm smiling so big. You can't see me if you're listening, but I have a huge smile on my face. Here's my thought about this, Sarah. It is so easy to point to organizations and say, the system's broken, this isn't right, and come from a place of scarcity. It's easy, right? We don't get paid enough. There are too many kids in our classroom. There's not enough funding. We can go on and on and on and on. You cannot solve problems by looking at the problem, first of all. And then the second piece is that organizations do not change until people change, period. And so there are a lot of folks who do work like this adjacent to what we're doing that are kind of break down the doors. And so I'm referencing actually a conversation I had with Amelia Nagowski on this podcast. I don't remember what episode it is, but I'll make sure I link it too. break down the doors, right? We're loud, we're big, we have messages, it's very emotion driven. And what happens is those folks make a lot of noise and brings a lot of attention to the issues. However, they're not often the ones who make the most change.
Mhm.
So I'm more of a backdoor inner instead of a break the door downer. Because when we go in through the back door, that's how we're making systemic change one person at a time, one school at a time, one district at a time. And it comes from a place of wholeness and empowerment and hope and light and healing and community. And that's the energy from which I want to make change in this space. And we can get angry and we can express our disappointment in the broken systems. That's part of the healing, is the expression of emotion. But building something from that space is never going to be sustainable. So that's how I look at this, that we are completely disrupting systems by shifting the paradigm of martyrdom, of self-sacrifice, of even just the word tradition, which in my world, I think I've shared this with you too, right? Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people.
I still love that. I can't hear that enough.
Just question, and it could be fine, but we need to ask questions. Is this serving us? Is this serving our community? Is this what's best for kids? Is this best for me? And really understanding that the most generous thing you can do for the students is take care of yourself. And then when we really embody that, that's when the change will start to happen.
Absolutely. I knew that you would have an exceptional answer for that. So thank you, because it's just one as I study organizational change and think about how to be that person that stimulates organizational change while also living this world where, as a coach and a consultant, I'm bit by bit, and I do believe we can change the world one person at a time. I think that is a hopeful message. And I think that is, every time I hear you speak to it, it's clearly meant for your voice. So it really helped me again to hear that. And tradition is peer pressure from dead people.
Isn't it great?
You also have that wonderful phrase that I've heard you say more than once, which is the most generous thing you can do for your students is take care of yourself. And I can't help, but I've been back in the school system in the last couple of years. And for some reason, people around me keep popping back in my mind as you're talking about it. And one example is somebody who was a teacher to my child. I have watched this individual in our small town as somebody that really inspired me as this joyous light, and then watched that individual struggle through some massive health challenges in the last couple of years, and been grateful to be a part of that person's life where they say it's so hard for me because I've never had to struggle like this before and it's really impacting my joy, but then be a colleague with that individual and watch just in 2 years a shift because that person finally said, okay, forget it. I'm taking care of myself. And now all of us, it's just like this cool little dip and then high again, like this incredible journey that I am so inspired by, because it doesn't matter how long you've been at it, you can still take care of yourself. And boy, I'll tell you that the kids in our community are so fortunate to have that individual pouring back into themselves so that they can continue this work. And it's just gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. It's a perfect embodiment of what we're talking about.
Yes. And in my world, and to be fair, I have rose-colored glasses on unapologetically all the time. I never take them off, but that's part of what drives me too, because I see a world that doesn't quite exist yet. So when I look at the world with those lenses, I see a workforce of educators who are doing exactly what that teacher did that you just described. Because again, when you pour into yourself, you have things to give. You can't give something you don't have. And we say all the time, we can't pour from an empty vessel. Mm-hmm. Put on your own oxygen mask. But these are just sayings we throw around. But the embodiment of what those actually mean are the things that are going to make a difference. You can have a poster up, and that's fine, I suppose, as a reminder or even an affirmation. Those are great too. But unless you are walking the walk and embodying the work, nothing's going to change. And it's really special to be able to witness and be a part of, if you are able to be a part of a community where everyone in that community starts making that shift.
Yes. And I felt like I needed to share this because I don't think I have before. And as you were talking about this, thinking about being part of a community, thinking about it being more than just the words we say, like this work, it is hard work. And I know that you have a personal journey that has required you to dig in and really make some hard choices and even discipline yourself to take care of yourself and to not question dead people, but alive people, by the way. We talked about this whole imposter syndrome that's in your mind, but the reality is there are actual people out there that will speak things to you that will make you question when you're on that development, that journey of personal development that's good for you. It's healthy. And you'll have people in your life that aren't ready for that, that don't like that change, that are uncomfortable with you taking that journey, and they may express it. And so what you said about surrounding yourself with a community of people that are on that for you, that is so important. I remember, so part of my journey is that in 2014, I started a running streak. And I've shared this before that it started out in a really unhealthy space. And I say this, like there's an evolution there. I was running away. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I was running away from so much. Eventually, I kept running through. I ran through identity crisis. I ran through losing my brother to suicide. I ran through leading through chaos and all sorts of things. And then I eventually started to run toward the version of myself that was healthiest. And I keep striving for that. But I'll never forget a person literally telling me this. I felt like your listeners needed to hear this, saying, you need to stop this running streak. It's going to become an obsession. And it was like, and this person literally said to me, what are you going to do? When is it going to be enough? Are you going to run on your daughter's wedding day? It's just going to be a problem for you. And I remember saying, actually, yeah, if I can have 15 minutes to myself on the day that is important to my daughter, whether it's her wedding or not, of course, she'd want her mom to show up as the best version of herself. But that was that person speaking negativity. For some reason, they were jealous. It wasn't even a person like deeply embedded in my life, but just all sorts of that, like questioning my motivation, questioning whether I should. And I thought, I was thinking about that this morning. Like, what in the world would possess a person to look at an individual who is clearly doing something for themselves and say, this is a problem for you?
You know why?
Tell me.
You know why?
Yeah.
Because it's confronting. And there are two things. Everyone's going to have an opinion.
You ask 9, you're going to get 11, right?
Yeah, which is why what other people think is none of your business. It is always a reflection on them. And all judgment is self-judgment.
Yes.
Because when they express that to you, it is really a piece of self-judgment about themselves. Because you're right. When we are not surrounded by people who lift us up, it is really easy for those voices to get louder and to infiltrate our psyche in a way where we think maybe they're right. Maybe I should. And as soon as you hear that word should, it's over. That's judgment right there, which is why the community piece is great, because then you can go to your community and say, hey, I've been doing this really great thing, and so came up to me and I'm having some feelings about this. And someone else like me can be like, no worries, Sarah, that's a reflection on them. What they have to say is none of your business. And that's the end of it. But to be left to your own devices and in processing that is not easy, which I think speaks to what you were saying earlier about community. And thank goodness you found that running. If that was the thing that was able to center you and ground you, and you made it a priority for yourself, yay you.
Well, this is from a person who hated running. But you know what? 100% right. I thought this morning, I'm so glad I didn't listen to that individual. And that person, as I'm thinking about that story, because I hadn't recalled it, stated that they had also been on a running streak and on day 1,000 had to put their shoes down because it was becoming an obsession for them. And therefore, projection.
That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's true. I think back on it and I think I feel healthy that I could recognize that I could continue that. I had a community of runners that was helping me process through that. And then also that you can evolve something into being really healthy for you, but having that self-awareness too. And yeah, so community, I think that's good. And I just wanted to say too, I think that listeners might, depending on where you're at with your own journey, think, oh, Sarah and Jen, man, they've arrived. They have it all figured out. I don't. And I share this all the time. Like I've got my physical, like body movement thing figured out in terms of taking care of myself, but there is consistent work that I need to do for healing always. This journey is never done until we're the dead people that are putting peer pressure on someone else.
And that does alleviate some of that pressure around it. There's no ending spot. There's no destination. This is the journey. And it's uncomfortable and painful and beautiful and the most exciting thing you can possibly do in this lifetime, because colors get brighter, your life gets richer, and you're more present to enjoy it. And that's what we want for everyone, and especially as your role in impacting school communities. So, huge. I'm glad that you said that. So I have to ask you, now that we're kind of nearing the end of this conversation, although we could talk forever, and I feel like we need to find another time for us to do this. So what is your dream for the future of education?
My dream probably aligns pretty carefully to yours, which I assume is just that when educators who are beautifully purposed have a healthy sense, and it's not about money or resources, but my dream is that every child could feel seen every day in the classroom, that they could feel validated and loved by the adult who is in charge of their learning for the day. That adult could feel seen and loved and validated by the people who are in charge of the building to keep them doing their work. That every middle manager could feel seen and loved and validated for the service that they give by all of the stakeholders that see them. I don't really care what the building looks like. I don't really care what resources the people do and don't have, but that people who show up every day to take care of our most valuable renewable resources in our children love their work and feel loved in their work. To me, that would be the best vision.
Yes. More of that.
More of that.
More of that, please. Sarah, this has been amazing. And I would love for you to tell folks how they can learn more about you and get in touch.
Well, first of all, I do find this work to be very important. And I teach some courses in a university here. And I always say, I don't know where I'll be 5 years from now, but I know I'll be here for you. And so that is true for all your listeners. If you found any of this helpful and you want to engage, please just send me a message. I'm on all of the social outlets except TikTok. I'll probably get there, but it's at Sarah S.A. Johnson. Sarah is with an H. You can find me on my website, www.sarahsajohnson.com. You can check out my own podcast where I had Jen as an exceptional guest recently. It's the In Awe podcast, stands for Amplifying Women to Empower a Community. That's where the awe comes from. I have a couple of books that I published, Balance Like a Pirate, Going Beyond Work-Life Balance to Thrive, and then also Lead with Faith, which is building strong foundations. You can rise up, slay fear, and serve well. You could grab either one of those on Amazon or, just DM me and let's talk.
Amazing. And all of those links will be in the show notes. It'll be super easy for people to get in touch and follow you and get your books and the podcast and all the thing. It was a joy to be on your podcast too. So I'm glad that we were able to continue the conversation here, and who knows what's next. So thank you so much for your time, for the work that you do in this world. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And same to you, Jen. I appreciate the honor of being on your show and anytime I get with you.
My pleasure. And so if you like today's episode, make sure that you leave a fantastic review, share with a friend, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Take Notes. Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.